Welcome back to Man vs. Meeple, the show where we talk about everything board game related. I am Jeremy Salinas, and today we're going to be taking a look at Lorenzo il Magnifico. It is a brand new worker placement card drafting style game. One of my favorite styles of game, period. And this comes from the designers of Grand Austria Hotel, which I know is a favorite of yours.
Absolutely. I saw the front of the box and I thought it looked familiar, and then we realized that are the same people involved with that. And you can see a lot of it in the game.
Yeah, there's a lot of similarities between that and this. So this is a large game. This is my style of game. This drew me in because it's a worker placement.
Yeah, we've had it for a couple days, and you've played it, 7 or 8 times?
8 times with you now. So I played it once at BGG-Con, really enjoyed it, and searched low and high to try to find a copy so that we could bring it to you guys. So in the game, each player will have a set of 4 family members, and they'll be using those families to go out to different positions on the board in order to enact different events, right?
Yeah, basically acquiring cards or executing some actions.
The unique portion in this game is that everyone has the same value workers, because at the beginning of the round, you're going to roll 3 common dice, which are black, white, and orange.
And that's what I love about these designers, too. You think dice, and everyone traditionally thinks, oh, there's some luck involved. But just like Grand Austria Hotel, this is about rolling the dice and everyone using those same dice to basically to specify what your workers can and can't do that round.
Yeah, and this is a no-luck game at all.
No.
Everything you do in here is tactical and strategic. So the game itself has a singular game board, and on the game board, the most prominent thing on here is the 4 towers. Each of these 4 towers is a column that represents a specific type of card that you can acquire. There's production cards, there's character cards, there's building cards, and then there are ventures.
Right.
And each of these has a position that can where they can be held onto your actual player board.
You can have up to 6 of each, right?
Yes, exactly.
So you hold the yellow building cards at the top, the territory cards down here, and then the purple and the blue cards, the character and the venture cards, go off to the right.
That's right. Each of these tower positions has a worker placement spot next to them. Those spots can hold 1 singular family member, and you have to go to that area with a particular family member that corresponds to a die. And we'll get into that in a moment. Some other places you can go to on the board, you have a production spot in the bottom left-hand corner. Those correlate to the green cards. You have the, I believe it's called the auxiliary event. Right above that, those correlate to the yellow cards.
Right.
And then you have some singular spots over here that will either give you gold or just extra servants, military dollars, and allow you to do favors.
Right. In a lot of cases, in a lot of games, those spaces are reserved for when you can't really do anything else. Although they do come into play here, you have to use them from time to time.
Of course, yes. Most of these spots are singular spaces where only one person can go. However, there are a couple common spots. The 2 most notable ones are the production and the auxiliary, where it can hold as many people as you so wish. However, there are negative side effects from going to those places. And then there's also a place here that anybody can go. And when you go there, the first player becomes the first player in the next turn. The second player to go there becomes the second player. And then it also gives you $1 for going there, and then a favor, which gives you a list of different kinds of things that you can gain from going to that spot. And turn order means a lot in this game, especially in a multiplayer game. Because it's going to allow you to be able to go out to these towers and get very important cards.
Yeah, it can get pretty crowded. Like you said, each spot can only hold 1 worker. But even if you go to the same tower, there are some penalties involved if someone else is even in any other spot in that tower. So 4 players can get a little dicey.
That's right.
No pun intended.
So at the start of a turn, the first player is going to roll all 3 of the dice, and they're going to set them in the location on the bottom of the board. That's the number that correlates to each of the different family members. Each player, as we said at the beginning, has 4 different family members have stickers on the top. These stickers have the die that it correlates to.
The white, the black, and the orange.
And there's also a last family member that is not color-coded to you, but the sticker is color-coded to you. That die value is always a 0. So the only way this can be mitigated is with servants in the game.
Right.
There are 4 different resources in the game. There is stone, wood, money, and servants. Servants are these purple characters, and they are used simply to mitigate dice.
Right.
Each one of these is worth a pip on a die. So if you wish to modify, say, a 1, you can use 5 servants to make it a 6.
Or, like you said, that one value zero worker can be mitigated with one worker to get to a 1 space, which a 1 can be used quite a bit on the board.
Let's talk about turn order. So players will be able to place one of their workers each turn. And when it comes back around to you, get to place a secondary worker and so forth. There are some rules for placing in the tower, and we need to go through those because those really kind of are the meat and potatoes of the game.
Yeah.
When you go to a tower, you have to use a worker that correlates with the level of the tower. If you go to the first level, it's simply a 1 pip worker, and then a 3, and then a 5, and then the last one is a 7.
Right.
And people are going to say, well, how do you roll a 7? Well, you can't roll a 7 in this game, but you can mitigate the die that you have with servants.
Exactly.
So the only way you can take stuff from the upper levels is by using servants in order to get to those areas. Now, the cool portion about the top 2 areas are that you get resources. You get bonuses.
There's bonuses up there. And so if you're rolling some pretty good dice on a round, that's the round to maybe go look up at the top. It's really one of the only few rounds that you can.
Right.
The cool thing about the way the dice work, though, is even in a round where someone's rolled really poorly, you've got a 1 and a couple 2s, if you've loaded up on servants, you can go ahead and snatch some cards up here that no one else really can if they don't have any servants.
Yeah. And each of these towers, once you get up into the top 2 levels, give you bonuses, money, defense, wood, and stone.
Right.
When you go to these locations, 3 of the towers require you to pay for the card itself. The last one, which is the territories, which are the green, they require no resources. So, for example, if I were to go to, say, for instance, the level 3 of the purple, this card requires that I also pay 3 stone to the bank.
Exactly.
And those are always on the curtain area on the left-hand side.
Yeah, it kind of treats the territories as something you can almost always do as long as you have the dice to do it.
Right.
But if you're low on resources, it doesn't really have too much of an impact over here.
So what's really interesting about the game, though, is that when you place a worker on one of these towers, there are negative side effects to people placing workers in those same towers in future turns. Now, what I mean by that, if I were to place a blue worker in the yellow tower, I do whatever it says. But if David were to go there and place in that same tower, he would have to pay $3 to the bank.
Right. In addition to whatever cost you have to pay to acquire the card that you're looking for as well.
So it doesn't matter how many workers are in that tower. As long as it's occupied by anybody, it's just a flat $3.
Right.
Now, you can also never place any of your colored workers in any tower that you've already been. So if I've already gone to this yellow tower, if it comes back to me, I can't place another one of my blue guys in that tower.
With the exception,
right, of the neutral colored worker. He can go in anywhere. There's no limitations. The only limitation, of course, is that he is always a 0 when you use him.
Exactly.
Once you start playing the game, you realize how important that mechanic, even in a two-player game, how stifling that can be for a player.
Oh, yeah, because money is... It can be pretty tight. I mean, there are some engines you can get, and we haven't even started to talk about the cards, but there's a lot of engines you can build up. But money can be tight, so it sometimes is very difficult to go to a space and have the money not only to buy the card if money is required, but also to pay those the 3 gold to even go there in the first place.
And what's cool about the neutral, too, is that you'll notice that every single worker placement spot on the board requires a 1 die. So you're always going to have to be using a servant in order to use to this guy.
Now, the other cool thing, when Jeremy's mentioned servants a couple times in terms of mitigating dice, the other thing that going on in the game, obviously, are all these cards. The game is all about acquiring these cards and placing them on your tableau, many of which can really have an impact on your play. Right. Some of them give some benefits, some instant benefits when you take them, some of which include using sort of a phantom 6 die or a 5 die that you don't really have, but it allows you basically an extra turn to take a card maybe that you wouldn't otherwise be able to get. There's also, we haven't talked about the leaders at all.
Yeah, let's talk about the leaders. These are cool. At the start of the game, each player is going to get 4 leaders. Each of these leaders is different. There's 2 portions to these cards. The top portion is a requirement that you have to have. Now, it's not what you have to spend. You simply have to have that on your tableau of items and cards. On the bottom is a permanent ability you either get for the rest of the game or once per round. So, for instance, if I were to have 2 of every single colored card on my tableau. For the rest of the game, no matter what dice are rolled, I would have a 5 on all of the pips of the dice.
Which can be very nice.
Yes.
Except for the fact, even if a 6 is rolled,
It becomes
it's a 5.
Yeah.
So what's cool about that is it gives you a lot of power in a lot of the different spaces, but sort of limits you on the spaces where you have 6s. So you're going to have to then use a servant to get up to those 6s.
Yeah, and a lot of these cards, you're going to be using either 1 or 2, maybe 3 in a game that you can get, just because it's simply hard to try to go all these different routes. This one requires 3 yellow cards, $12, and 2 on the faith track. If at any point in the game you say, I'm never going to be able to reach this, you can simply discard the card out of the game and get any one of the favors at the bottom.
Yeah, and that's nice to be used in a pinch.
Yeah.
But the games we've played, I think you've probably played a lot more than me. I got rid of 3 cards the last time we played, and you did as well. Is that common in your other plays too?
Yeah, very much so. The cards themselves, these are labeled 1 through 3 on the back sides. There are 3 ages basically that you're going to play through. The cards will always come out in a very specific order. For age 1, there's always 8 cards. For age 2, there's 8 cards. And for age 3, there's 8 cards. So you're going to play 6 rounds in the game. At the end of all the age 1 cards, you're going to have to support the church. That is a track that you see right here called the faith track. There are 3 tiles, and there's a lot of different tiles in the game. This has 9 different of each different kind, so the variability in that is great. You're going to place a 1 age, a 2 age, and a 3 age down. So at the end of the first age, each player has to be directly below that on the faith track. If you are not below that on the faith track, you will become excommunicated from the church.
Right.
And what that means is that the red player, or all the other players there, would have to take one of their cubes and place it on the age 1 tile. That means for the rest of the game, they suffer that negative benefit, whatever that may be.
Right.
In this case, for every time you acquire money, you get 1 less money.
Right.
By the end of the second age, players would have to be underneath this tile. And then at the end of the game, it's this tile. This one is always an in-game condition, which can be devastating. That one, for instance, says, for every 5 victory points you have at the end, you lose 1. Now, players can choose to not meet the requirements and become excommunicated. If they're excommunicated, they simply stay where they are on the faith track. If you do choose to support the church, you always move back to 0.
Right.
Which is very interesting. So some players we have seen where, for instance, this one says, every purple card you buy, the pip that you use is a -4. Well, I may not be going a purple strategy. So being excommunicated means nothing to me. So I may want to start the next round where I left off instead of going all the way back to 0. And
the reason to do that is at a certain point when you score the faith track, if you choose to go back or at the end of the game, you're going to be that much further up the faith track, that many more points.
Yeah, exactly. Now, there's a lot of intricacies within the cards themselves. There is a military track on the right-hand side. There's no fighting in this game. You're not combating any other players. You're simply blocking players. The military track goes along with the territories. Any time in the game, you can have 2 territories. But in order to have a 3rd territory, your military track has to be up to 3, and so forth, all the way up to having an 18 military in order to get your 6th card. The reason why you want to do that is because it helps with production, and it also gives you a massive amount of victory points at the end, further that you go along.
That's the one thing we didn't mention. It's probably a good time to do so. When you go to the production or the auxiliary action, you're going to activate all of the cards you have in that section.
That's right.
So if you've really loaded up on territory cards, which Jeremy did the first time we played, every time he'd go to the production, he would do this, then this, then this, and just had a massive amount of stone and wood and workers down here. And on the flip side, I was activating the auxiliary action, which was more about victory points. So I was scoring a few victory points based on some machines and engines that I'd built up.
Yeah, that's a very interesting mechanic, how that works and how you can kind of tie all the cards in together.
Well, yeah, and it makes for extraordinarily satisfying gameplay.
Right.
One of the things I love about a game is where you can feel satisfied each turn, and when you do one action and you're able to do 4 different cards worth of actions on it, that is just fun.
I also love how both of those the green greens and the yellows also, yes, you can go produce, but you have to have a particular dice in order to produce. If you notice on the bottoms of each of these cards, there is a number associated with that. So if you go to that production house and this requires a 6, but you only have a 3, you can't do that production action.
Exactly. And of course, the actions that are on those cards are generally the stronger with the higher value dice that there are.
Yeah. And
the other thing that Jeremy mentioned about the military track, like he said, there's no fighting, but because you need it, it kind of goes hand in hand with those territories because those are so easy to get up until your third. And then you have to start considering that military track.
Yeah.
And, of course, at the end of the game, if you fill this thing up, it's 20 victory points, which isn't insignificant in this game.
Yeah. I mean, victory points, this is a point salad game.
Yeah.
For sure. Everything you do in this game gives you victory points in some way.
Yeah, either long-term or short-term.
Yeah, the green cards give you victory points the more you have. The same thing with the blue cards. They are characters. They typically mitigate the way that you play, but if you have six of them at the end of the game, it's 21 points.
Right.
Your yellow cards are the things that help you do conversions, but typically all of these yellow cards give you instant victory points.
Instant victory
and
points.
then a way to convert things into victory points. And then your ventures are also instant actions, but they also give you end of the game victory points.
Yeah, those are long-term victory points. It's really cool how all these different colored cards interwork with one another.
Right.
You know, the yellow, I had a machine going where I'd activate yellow, and it gave me points for all my blues and my purples.
Yep.
You didn't have any yellow in our game that we just played, but you had a whole slew of green. So you're just getting massive amounts of resources, which in turn allowed you to get a lot more different cards than I could.
Yeah, there's a ton of variability in this game. The excommunication tiles, as we mentioned, there's a whole slew of these. They can be mixed and mingled any way that you so wish. There's 20 different leaders in the game, so the 4 that you get are probably not going to be the same from the previous game or even a mixture of those. There's also variability in the way that the cards come out each round, and typically the higher card is not always the best card, right?
Right.
So some of the better cards can slot down, and the game eventually starts to ramp up. As you get into the second age, those cards are stronger than the first stage cards. The third age cards, of course, are stronger than the second and first stage cards.
Yeah, it's really cool. The way you were mentioning, the way the cards come out, the higher ones aren't necessarily better, which basically turns to looking at the dice, evaluating the dice at the beginning of each round to really determine, okay, we're all going to be playing down here for the most part.
Right.
So what's my best move? That's where the tactics come into play for sure.
Yeah.
If the dice are all high, it just kind of opens up the round a little bit, so because everyone's going to be able to play on this whole table.
That's right. Another thing to consider, guys, is that this game scales really, really well for 2 to 4 players. I played it in everything but 3 players, but I played a 2 and a 4-player game. The 2-player has these tokens, I'm not sure where they went, but they cover specific actions on the game board, so they make the game tighter for the players. They're going to cover some of the production, some of the auxiliary actions, and then some of the 2 instant actions down here. So they are going to force players to commit to certain spots earlier in a round, which is really, really good.
No, that's really great. I think whenever they do something like that, it obviously evidences that they put a lot of thought into scaling the game. I haven't played it with 4 players yet, but I'm really looking forward to playing this.
Another thing is, as we mentioned at the beginning, this is from the designers of Grand Austria Hotel. We both like that game, but a lot of people's complaints about the game is that the turn order, especially with a 4-player game. Most people are like, I will never play Grand Austria Hotel with 4 players because it simply takes too long to get back to them, so people are making variants and whatnot to the rules. This is an extremely quick playing game. I mean, we played a 2-player game in under an hour. I played a 4-player game in about an hour and a half. It's quick to play because you're simply taking one of your workers, placing on the board, taking the action, next player's turn.
Yeah, there's not a lot. I mean, there's a little bit of opportunity. Potentially, if someone's prone to analysis paralysis, they might take some time because you have to kind of take in all of these cards and kind of go, okay, what can I do here? What am I trying to do? And consider what everyone else is doing. But other than that, the game really clips along at a nice pace.
And the last thing I'll say that I enjoy about this game is that when you get into Euro games, you have a lot of iconography in it, especially for a game like this. There is no player aid in the game that talks about what specific action means, but the iconography in the game is so well done that everything is extremely self-explanatory by looking at the card. There's a few kind of rules in there that they talk about specifically about cards, but they apply to all the cards in the game. That's a sign of a really well-developed and really designed game, in my opinion.
Oh, no, it's right. And just like Grand Austria Hotel, but I do want to say, the game is nothing. It's not Grand Austria Hotel in any way, shape, or form.
No.
But as you play this, if you're familiar with that game, you'll see some very, very slight similarities in terms of just the fact that they're using dice. But other than that, the fact that they're working in worker placement and a lot of other some of our favorite mechanics.
Yeah.
It's a great combination of all of that.
Yeah.
I think this is going to be one of our favorite games for sure.
Absolutely. Guys, go check that out. We know right now it's from Cranio Creations. I believe it's only available in Europe. It will be coming out second quarter from Cool Mini or Not,
Right.
Simon.
An interesting title for them to pick up. I'm really glad to see them picking up a game like this.
Yeah, so go check it out, guys. That's Lorenzo Il Magnifico. Make sure you guys make comments below in this YouTube channel. Subscribe to us, please. Follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and everything else we do.
Right.
Check you guys out next time.
Bye-bye.
Season 1 of Man vs. Meeple is sponsored by TMG Games, publisher of great games like Yokohama, Guilds of London, and the soon-to-be-released Colosseum.